There's nothing more scary and interesting than when a book from years ago somehow predicts certain parts of the future. The original Running Man novel from Stephen King, or Richard Bachman, is set in 2025. The main character is in desperate need of money for medical help, and the only way to feasibly get the money he needs is to compete on a game show where it's rigged and for everyone else's delight except for his own. And given that right now, the US is facing a crisis on health insurance being too expensive, people like Mr. Beast are recreating the Squid Games because he completely missed the point of the show, and everyone is always filming everything, it just kind of fits. But the original movie adaptation of The Running Man is surprisingly nothing like the original story, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing Ben Richards, a police helicopter pilot who is ordered to shoot upon 1,500 civilians who are rioting for access to food. And at the time of recording, that is scary accurate. He refuses, is sent to a work camp, becomes part of an escape plan where one guy gets his head blown up, and eventually all of them get out. After he escapes prison, Ben kidnaps a lady in her apartment, forces her to accompany him to the airport so he can get away, all while the head of the Running Man show named Killian is working on tracking Ben down in order to get him on the show. Because unlike the version of the opener we saw, the footage has been doctored to make it look like Ben not only wanted to kill the civilians, but did. And it's weird in the first 20 minutes that they made Ben likable for being framed and wanting to do the right thing, and then immediately unlikable for holding a lady hostage so he can escape. You see, in the book, Ben volunteers to compete in the game because he needs money for his sick kid. But in this version, Killian, the guy who runs the game, just wants to get him on the game because he's a really big jacked dude. Also, during this airport scene, Ben just makes sexist remarks in order to get past security and just like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to root for this guy or not. It doesn't matter because she hits him in the nuts and he's ultimately captured by the police, which leads him to competing in The Running Man. Now, also in the book, the game takes place across the country with people hunting the runners down. They go to places like Boston, New York City, and Manchester. I mean, Stephen King loves his New England towns. Yet, in this movie, it's just a weird course that they compete on and have like mini boss battles. Either way, Ben is forced to play in the game, but not before a bunch of ladies in 1980s gym attire do a little dance for the crowd. I will say, seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger in a bright yellow spandex suit is both hilarious and hard to look at all at once. And it's only hard to look at because it's so yellow. And in a last-minute twist, two of Ben's friends from the jailbreak are also forced to compete with him in the game because the movie wants you to know that Killian is a bad dude. And honestly, he does a pretty good job of being a bad dude. And is it just me, or does the rocket sled that they take down to the game low-key kind of look super fun? I feel like I would have a blast riding this thing. It looks like a roller coaster ride at Universal Studios. The first mini boss battle that they have is a guy named Sub-Zero. No, not the fun one from Mortal Kombat. This guy is dressed like a hockey player, and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all his friends just kind of slip and slide around him on an ice rink. He doesn't even last that long because Ben wraps barbed wire around his neck and kills him while also taunting Killian in the process. Then we have Buzzsaw and Dynamo who enter the game to kill the runners. And it's super funny to me that in this version of The Running Man, it's just wrestling with murders. Like, Dynamo is an opera singer. Get the fuck out of here. How am I supposed to take this seriously when he's singing opera in his little light bulb car? Now, during all of this, the lady that Ben took hostage, her name is Amber, she finds out the truth about Ben's altered videotape, so she's also sent to the games to compete after she's discovered finding out the truth. The four runners get chased around by Buzzsaw and Dynamo until one of them gets slashed by a chainsaw, Ben gets dragged behind a dirt bike, and eventually he uses the cable to flip Buzzsaw off his bike. Buzzy Boy and Ben have a fight, which ends when Ben uses the guy's chainsaw against him to kill him. Dynamo then sings some more opera and chases Ben in his little car, and I mean that literally. His car is weirdly tiny. Dynamo is also a bad driver because he flips his car, begs for his life, and then in front of everyone on television, Ben decides not to kill him. Unfortunately for Ben, both of his friends get killed during this battle, and then a guy named Fireball enters the game. Can you guess why he's called Fireball? It's because of his flamethrower, in case you couldn't figure it out. He chases after Ben and Amber for a second before Ben makes him explode. He wouldn't kill Dynamo when he was helpless, but he will deactivate a man's flamethrower and explode him with a road flare. I guess there really are layers to Ben Richards in this movie. Desperate to kill Ben, Killian sends in the Running Man legend named Captain Freedom to wrestle around with Ben in a ring, and using the magic of movies, he makes it look like he kills Ben. But really, Ben and Amber were with a group of rebels planning to take over the satellites in order to show the people the truth. And during this, I love that Amber's gun is an Uzi with a silencer and this weird ass scope. Like, what's she going to do? Submachine gun someone at long range? What a weird attempt to make a gun look futuristic, because nowadays, it just looks silly. She does, however, get to electrocute Dynamo to death by using the sprinklers, and that's pretty neat. In the end, Ben straps Killian to the rocket sled, sends him flying down the tunnel, and he explodes when he flies into a billboard of himself. I find it odd that this movie tries to both be a comedy and serious at the same time. The world-building, dystopian feel to the reality show where people cheer for death and the messaging all paint a pretty serious tone. But then you have Arnold Schwarzenegger making puns about every single person he kills. There's also the hilarious looking jumpsuits that everyone is wearing, and all of the stalkers look like characters from a Temu fighting game. And calling the bad guys stalkers instead of hunters feels like a weird choice to me. Because again, in the book, they're called hunters. But this adaptation just decided to say fuck it. I also think the silliness is a byproduct of this movie being made in the 1980s, and that's just kind of how it was for some reason. It is an odd choice to ditch so much of the source material when, in my opinion, this interpretation is far less interesting. What is interesting is how the prison work camp is basically like Suicide Squad because everyone has a bomb collar that will blow your head off. There's also a moment when Amber buys a can of Coke and it's $6. How long until that becomes a reality, am I right? For 1987 though, this movie also kinda nails some of the future tech it thought we would have in 2025. Pretty much everything in Amber's house is voice activated. Okay, that's the only thing I really noticed because unfortunately, we don't have flamethrower jetpacks yet. There's another show that we see a preview for where you climb a rope that has money on it while a bunch of dogs bite at your feet. I gotta be honest, out of the two games, I'd probably sign up for the rope climbing one. A lot of why this movie is the way it is starts to make sense when you realize that this is the same guy who directed the Shaquille O'Neal Kazam movie. Kazam is a weird movie that is way more about Shaq rapping than it is anything else. And I've actually covered it, so you should go check that out. But that also explains the goofiness in the Running Man movie too, because that director just likes to make goofy things apparently. We also need to talk about everyone's performance in this thing, because if we're being honest, they're not very good. Most of the time, everyone feels really flat and like they showed up to just say their lines and go home. Don't get me wrong, there are moments where people actually try and give good snippets, but overall, I wasn't really compelled by anyone. The only exception would maybe be Killian. Throughout, he plays a pretty convincing corporate douchebag game show host who only cares about ratings and fame. And I also can't tell if Arnold Schwarzenegger saying "I'll be back" is done as a fun nod, coincidence, or just silly. Maybe it's just because the Running Man book is one of like 10 that I've actually read in my life, and I actually quite like it. So to see this be someone's version, vision, or interpretation just doesn't really make sense to me because it's missing all of the parts that make the original story interesting and compelling. But I also know a lot of people like this movie for real, and I can definitely see why. However, I still didn't personally like it that much. At the end of the day, this version is at least goofy enough for me to put it in so bad, it's good.